Well, hey, welcome to DECENTRAFIVE. My special guest today is Brenden Mulligan. And Brenden, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Good stuff. Well, this is 5 minutes, 10 questions, 0 edits. Here we go. First question. You are a builder focused on helping Web3 development as well as podcasters. What's one thing you're working on right now for Web3 and for podcasting you're excited about, that you're pumped about?
Okay. The podcast is easy. That's podpage.com. It makes it super easy for podcasters to spin up a website using their RSS feed that takes care of itself, updates itself, and they don't really need to mess with. And it's an alternative to WordPress. So that project's been going on for a couple of years, and it's a great project. And then in the Web3 space, there's a project called Premint, which it's in the NFT world and is being used heavily by the NFT community to register people to be able to buy things that they're releasing prior to the mint date. So it helps people build, it's called access lists. So instead of saying, hey, everyone come buy this thing at this website, you first say, pre-register here, give me some information. Then when the day comes to sell it, it just makes the whole process easier for all parties. So those are the two projects I'm most excited about.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Cool.
So what are the two most recent podcasts that you've listened to?
Two that are on my list that I constantly listen to. One is called Proof, and it is a NFT Web3 focused podcast that I help a little bit with. They host their site on Podpage. And then another is a friend has a podcast called All the Hacks, which if anyone ever likes finding deals or hacking travel, it's a really great tactical podcast that, talks about each episode kind of zeroes in on one thing. So how to stay at 5-star hotels for 3-star prices, or what's the best credit card to get if you want to maximize your points, all that stuff. So it's a great podcast by someone. I've known the host many, many years, and he is brilliant at this type of thing. And he finally is sharing it with other people. So it's very cool.
What is the Web3 project that you're not involved with, but you absolutely are intrigued by and excited about?
Ooh, that is interesting. I think that, this is a boring answer if you're in the space, but I've had a lot of respect and long-term admiration for a project called Art Blocks, and they're sort of one of the first generative art platforms. And I think that what I'm interested in there is they sort of kicked off a lot of the NFT craze right now. It was their platform that was responsible for it. A lot of people are copying them in different areas and doing the art blocks for photography or art blocks for AI art. And all these platforms are really cool. So I'm excited to see all of them sort of grow together. But I think Art Blocks is I think Act 2 is coming, and I'm excited to see what they do next with it.
So one sentence, and it can be a compound sentence, something that you value that you learned while working with Google.
I value, so this is sort of an anti-value. Google is a huge organization, and it was very hard to get things done because of the immense amount of weight that that process puts on it. And I have a lot of respect for Google because they've gotten to the point where they need to have that process because they're such a massive part of our world. When I left Google, I cherished the ability to move fast and iterate much quicker than you can in a big organization. I think working at Google convinced me that Google is amazing, but it's not amazing for me. And so it's really made me value that ability as in a small organization to be able to make quick decisions and keep moving really quickly. A big thing.
I love it. You're a California Wine Appellation Specialist. First, what is that? And second, what's a wine you've enjoyed recently?
In the wine world, you can get all kinds of different certifications, and the top one is the sommelier certification that allows you to, be an expert. And if you haven't seen Somm, it's an amazing movie to talk about that process. This is because of the depth of California wine, there's a San Francisco wine school created this program just to teach people about specifically about wines in this region. Because there's such a difference between even just wines like on the eastern side of San Francisco and the northern side of San Francisco. And so I love learning a lot about where I live and the things around me. And so I took this class purely for fun. And it teaches you all of, the different parts of the wine industry up and down California. So that's what it is.
I love it.
Wines that I've had recently, my wife and I are on a hunt to find great bottles that are under $20. for, and really drink those exclusively. As much as I love fancy wines, I don't prefer to drink them most of the time. And so we found this $11 Riesling. I can't even remember what the name is, to be honest. Dr. Lucen or something like that. It's a low alcohol, just sort of like nice end of day or like evening bottle that we've been enjoying. But certainly not, most wine snobs would definitely look down their nose at it because it is not a fancy wine, but it is delicious.
So you helped with Frontline Foods. You helped them raise over 10 million to support local restaurants so they could make it through the pandemic, which is amazing, by the way. What are some local restaurants that you love eating at where you are, or really anywhere in the world?
There's a few. I live in Redwood City, California, which is just south of San Francisco. There's a great sort of pub that we love supporting called Timber and Salt. There's a great Mexican place called Bamacoco in the area. You go up to San Francisco and there's just an endless amount of amazing food that we love. Elsewhere in the world, when you sent me that question over email, I don't even know the name of it. I meant to look it up, but it is on the top of a hill outside of Dubrovnik in Croatia. And it's sort of like this farm, not like a fancy farm. It's just sort of this restaurant where you order ahead for, what they call it, under the pekka or the pekka. It's like they cook everything under a bell. They stew meats. It was just one of the most special experiences when we were there, but very random out of town. And then I think the other one that always comes to mind is down in Los Cabos. There's a place called Flora Farms, which is actually some people from Northern California moved down there. And it is an amazing experience. It's an amazing place to take kids. It's an amazing place to go on a date. It's just this like really wonderful environment. It's about like 30 or 45 minutes outside of where most people stay down there. But if you go to Cabo, it's a must do.
One thing current business execs need to wake up to with regard to Web3.
I think that, most business execs, some venture capitalists look at Web3 and think it's just like kind of more crypto scams. And they're not digging into it at a deeper level than just like people are buying and selling expensive JPEGs, or they're looking at it in a very basic way and dismissing it very quickly. I think that there's something very powerful about the fact that you can buy and sell digital assets that are unlocked from certain marketplaces. So I use ticket buying concert tickets as an example. Right now, you can buy a ticket from Ticketmaster. If you want to resell it, in a way that it can be verified, you have to do that on Ticketmaster's site. So Ticketmaster owns the entire experience. You can't sell it somewhere else. You could technically kind of go over to StubHub, but it's a little less trustworthy because you don't know, if you've ever bought a ticket on StubHub, there's always the moment before you walk in the venue where you go when they scan this, is it going to scan well? And I think Web3 allowing people to buy and sell assets on any marketplace they want to get, with this sort of open database that is the blockchain, actually will have a much more transformative effect on the ability to create great user experiences, the way that royalties work when you can buy something and the original person gets a cut. It would be amazing if when U2's tickets sell for $20,000 in the secondary market, the band gets a cut of it, or more importantly, smaller bands. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of dynamics and it's just so early and there's so much interesting stuff. I just feel like a lot of people are dismissing it without thinking about how it could be interesting. So. Yeah,
big deal. I agree. So one non-negotiable every podcast needs.
Well, I'm a little biased here, but I do have a website platform for podcasters. And so, I won't directly say a website, but I will say what I think a website brings you, which is a direct relationship with your audience. I think iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever player you want, they're amazing distribution platforms, and they allow you to get your content out for free into people's pockets, which is nothing to take lightly. It's amazing. But ultimately, if you only have a relationship with your audience through those platforms, then you don't have a relationship with your audience. They're Apple's customer, there's Google's customer. And I lived in the music industry during the MySpace crash, rise and fall, and I saw what happens when you're overly reliant on platforms as the way that you communicate with your audience. You're left with nothing when the platform changes their strategy. And so I think that whether it's an email list or a website or a Patreon, some direct relationship with your customers that you can build slowly over time, I think is the best way to make a long-term business out of your podcast and have actual sticky long-term listeners. So.
I love it. I love it. Forecast. So we got 2 questions left. Forecast. One way that you see Web3 making the world a better place.
It's going to be Web3 and things that are related to it. But I do think that there is this concept, and it's still going to be, there's years to go to make it more tangible for normal, non-technical people. But there is this concept in Web3 of sort of everything is built into a contract. And so you don't have to have trust. Everything is programmatically everything is a programmatic sort of cause and effect. And so I think being able to know on Ticketmaster does this, again, to go back to tickets. If you go to Ticketmaster, you know that if you buy secondary on Ticketmaster from a Ticketmaster event, because it's Ticketmaster that you'll get that. But you have to be in the walled garden for that kind of assurance. I think Web3 allows anyone across platforms to do that because of the way that ownership is modeled. And I think right now it's in its infancy, and we're playing around with artwork, and it's really, really cool. There's starting to do membership passes and different things, but I think it will evolve to a much bigger deal, and it'll make a lot of people, unfortunately for some people, it'll make people no longer need it. It sort of takes care of a lot of the trust and legal work. If you do it, A, B will happen. You don't really need contracts because it's already sort of transparently written into the blockchain. So I just said a million nerdy things, but I think all of that will be a lot more accessible to normal people over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's great. Last question. Who's a guest that I should invite to interview with DECENTRAFIVE?
I don't know if there's someone that I wouldn't recommend. I think that there's just so many people out there that are interesting to talk to, that I think it's a cop-out answer, but I can't pick one person because I feel like every day it's like every person I get on the phone with, whether it's an NFT artist, whether it's a podcaster, whether it's someone starting a new company. That's the great thing about podcasting is your content is endless because there's so many interesting people out there.
For sure. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode, and thank you for what you do and the way you even enable people like me. I really appreciate it. And all the links to the things you talked about, I'll put in the show notes so people can see it. But again, thanks for your time today, Brenden. It means a lot.
So, thank you very much.